Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0.
Got such a treat for you today on Workforce 4.0 because I get to talk to Mike Yost. And for anybody that is connected in the systems integration space with automation and manufacturing, they are probably pretty familiar with Mike Yost, or at least a lot of the organizations that Mike Yost is involved in. So, Mike, how are you? Do you want to introduce yourself quickly and tell us a
Sure.
little bit more about your involvement in the industry?
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and big fan of you personally and the work that you're doing and appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk with you. Just real quickly, been around manufacturing and the industrial automation, industrial software space for 3 decades. Started in the early 1990s on the automation side. And really grew up with software in manufacturing. So some of the organizations that you mentioned, I worked for solution providers like Rockwell and GE, and then some software startup companies on the manufacturing intelligence side and manufacturing execution side. But I spent about 12 years in industrial nonprofits, also working for an organization called MESA International, the Manufacturing Enterprise Solutions Association, and then a couple of years leading outreach efforts, which is workforce related for the National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. So I stopped that about 2 years ago and I've been working on a startup since then and always trying to engage in this conversation of how do we help manufacturers understand the role and the value and the fit of modern technologies.
Absolutely. And I know you're very passionate about not only the technology, but making sure that people are the center of all of the technology and the processes. So as the tech is getting better and faster and more efficient, making sure that your frontline workforce is able to adopt it easily and making sure that it supports your business
Yep.
growth strategy overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been a number of things that have really made an impact for me in my career. And first and foremost is really understanding that the principles that I was fortunate enough to be a part of, solutions that we were deploying were, I believed, applicable to all manufacturers. And so I ended up working for a number of large organizations that basically served large organizations, and it just kept, galling me that we couldn't get the solutions to other organizations and really scale the help. Because to me, what's been driving me as of late, especially over about the past half decade, is my oldest son is now a senior in college. But when he was about a sophomore or a freshman in high school, I started thinking, what can I do to give him an opportunity to come back here? I live in Northeast Ohio, and I thought, what I can do best is really help the manufacturing communities, right? The companies and the communities that rely on manufacturing companies. If they can be more competitive, they can take advantage of these evolving technologies. Then I have a better shot at my kids having an opportunity to come back here when they're out of the house and out of college and things like that. So that's really been at the core of what I think these technologies are all about: is how are you helping people? How are they helping them in their day-to-day jobs? How are they helping the communities that they're a part of?
Absolutely. I love that that's the thought process of a parent, right? It's like, okay, once you get through the infant stage and the toddler years and, up to that point of high school, because up to that point they like want to have something to do with you. And then, then it's kind of like you can see this trajectory where they're just like slowly disconnecting and you're like, okay, so
Sure.
how do we make sure they come back? I'm that one. I'm that one. I would be that one. So I can appreciate that as well. So, Mike, it's just kind of tradition at this point with Workforce 4.0. that I get the conversation started with a little bit of an icebreaker, and I gotta know, and because I feel like you're gonna have a great answer for this, but I want to know, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, good gracious. Well, first of all, if I am doing karaoke, you better look, because somebody has probably drugged me or is, holding a gun on me or something like that. But what I will admit is that, excuse me, I am a huge Prince fan. So I was molded and shaped very early in my life by an older brother who was addicted to Prince, and he got me hooked. So I would never be able to sing any of his songs, but in a karaoke setting, I would probably go to Kiss and put on my best falsetto and see if I could deliver it at all in memory of Prince. So
Yes, I love that so much. I think you would rock it.
Thank you for your confidence.
I think at the next event where we happen to run into each other, I think we should make that happen.
Well, like I said, you better bring a gun or somehow coerce me. So,
Well, it'll be fun.
yeah,
I'll get up there with you. Would that help?
that would definitely help. That would definitely help.
Awesome. I love Prince. I'm from Bowling Green, Kentucky, so I quite, resonate with Little Red Corvette.
Oh,
There's
there
a
you
lot
go.
of those running around up there.
Yeah.
So great choice. I'm looking forward to hearing that in real life. So, Mike, you work closely with systems integration companies on ensuring that their workforce is dedicated to upskilling. So, what have been some of your takeaways working with some of these companies, and what do you feel like is a fair assessment of where the industry is when it comes to digital preparedness?
Wow. So yeah, to me, I started my career with Rockwell, and Rockwell has a phenomenal channel and relies heavily on the systems integrators. And then as I moved into the software side of things, I mean, integrators played absolutely integral part in understanding the fit, specifying projects, deploying projects, supporting them long term, et cetera. So I've talked for a number of years about what I call the systems integrator dilemma. And that is, one, there aren't enough of them. And two, the way that systems are bought and sold, it pretty much it's a very cyclical business. And the systems integrators typically either have resources that are on the bench burning cash, or they're overtaxed and not available. And so it's a really, really cyclical kind of business for many systems integrators. So that, how do we flatten out that curve for them so they have more reliable business, and that they can also expand the offerings, the capabilities that they provide, because they end up in a position of trust with the manufacturers, which is absolutely crucial to anything we're talking 4.0, right? So industry 4.0, workforce 4.0, the new technologies, like, who do we trust? Keep us safe. Let us know the landscape. Let us know where we're going. Deal with these realities that we're dealing with all the time. And so I think when you ask about sort of the current state and where we're going, another part of the dilemma that I see is that a lot of integrators are technology focused and need either a connection to or a relationship with somebody that's more focused on the operational excellence side of things. So how do we look at improving somebody's business operations and the challenges that they face overall of how they're growing and evolving and managing their business? And then where does the technology fit in underneath that? So I think, especially as we see the speed and pace at which technology evolves, how technology is just coming out of the woodwork, all of a sudden you'll see a solution provider company seemingly come from nowhere that's been in business for 7 or 8 or 10 years. And you think they've just appeared out of nowhere, but they've been really working their craft for a long time. And the manufacturers are like, well, I don't know them from anybody. And so they need a trusted source. And oftentimes that's a systems integrator organization. So I really think a challenge for our time right now is getting access to that resource pool, and that resource pool having better connections to talk beyond the technology, beyond the physical wiring, the physical configuration of systems and databases and communications protocols and things like that. I personally think that they're the right audience, the right group to evolve and take that next step. But I really think it's a crucial step for manufacturers to have that trusted set of resources from a community like that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I too have been working in manufacturing for the majority of my career. And I know what you mean when you're kind of bringing up this issue of trust and what providers can you trust, what companies can you trust in order to work with, because it does get into intellectual property, at some points, and how much do you share. Let me ask you this, because you are a networking maverick. Like, yeah, you are so good at networking. You have really taught me. I don't know if you've known this, but you've taught me how to network at a next level in a lot of ways. And let me kind of bring that back to trust. How can you assess, as maybe like a small medium enterprise, for example, what are some things you can use to assess whether or not a partner is trustworthy? How do you build those relationships? How do you take your networking to that next level?
Great question. Obviously we're part of the Industry 4.0 Club, right, which is now officially a nonprofit, and it has a charter and a mandate to serve the greater good, not to be commercial. As I mentioned before, I worked for MESA International, which is right now celebrating its 30th year in industry. If you look around, most regions that have a manufacturing base are going to have some sort of nonprofit support. They're going to have manufacturing councils, lean councils, growth councils, things like that. They'll have MEPs, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. And so I think a lot of folks end up going there to sort of build community and really learn with and from each other. And I think maybe just to step back 1 second to the earlier question about the integrator community, most smaller organizations aren't going to even know what a systems integrator is, or conclude that it's too expensive for them. They can't ever engage with somebody at that level. So, I think talking with people, really certainly checking credentials, right? So, talk to, if somebody has a solution for you, you're considering, talk to companies that have worked with them, see how long that they have worked with them, and, also understand sort of the short and long-term vision of how they engage. Because if a company's going to walk in and sell you something and walk out the door, and there's going to be no way to maintain support with you, then that would be a concern, that you're going to be stuck there supporting infrastructure that you may not have the capacity and in-house capabilities to serve or to be able to support. So I do think, again, one of the thing I'd like to make sure comes out in the response to your question is I really do think manufacturers have to play more of an active role today than they have at any time throughout my career, of saying, yes, I want to be a part of this. Yes, I want to educate myself. Yes, I want to understand. And I'll be I do not think the problem with Industry 4.0 technologies is on the manufacturer side. I think it's the market that serves the manufacturers is fragmented, and a real challenge of how they serve the manufacturers, much more so than the manufacturers have too little resources, aren't smart enough, don't know what to do. Most of the smaller companies that I deal with, and I work with a lot of nonprofits regionally, they know what to do. They know what they want to get accomplished, but they don't know who to trust. So a lot of them are starting to take on more of a responsibility on their own to educate themselves, be part of these types of nonprofits, these regional groups, things like that, to see if they can bounce ideas off each other, be in community together, network share, those sorts of things.
I feel like I'm seeing an uptick in that, with like comparing my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky, 5-6 years ago, and then looking at where we are now, I'm definitely seeing an uptick in that interest. So I can I can speak for that. I think this is happening,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think there are a lot of, there are different avenues and ways today. I mean, we have members and founders in the Industry 4.0 Club that are manufacturers that are trying to engage and, make connections and find people that they can trust. And one thing that I also say is that it's been an interesting learning for me is, typically speaking, the regional people that on the nonprofit side that I deal with that are not necessarily specifically from manufacturing have a real fear of ever engaging a solution provider in a conversation because they feel that they can't be non-commercial. Like, as soon as I bring in a solution provider and introduce them to my manufacturing clients, they're just going to sick them, right? It's going to be like sharks in the water to go try to sell them stuff. And I have to say that does happen sometimes, but by and large, the people that I was a part of MESA with, the people that are in the Industry 4.0 Club with, they understand that they need to give of themselves. They need to share knowledge. They need to help educate as part of what they do in order to, really bring everybody along to have a baseline of understanding to engage with them. So I think that's another area where we have to challenge and say, all right, we're going to have to get the whole community working together here and sharing, put up safeguards, but also not just put up barriers to where, we're not going to talk to those folks because they have a lot of really important, experience that they can share.
Absolutely. I love that. That's, a big reason on why I'm involved in Industry 4.0 Club as well. And speaking of that, we met through the Industry 4.0
Yep.
Club, and we started out on Clubhouse, the Clubhouse app. But we've been able to maintain a pretty close professional relationship over the value of not only digital transformation, but keeping people at the center of technology. And my question from that is, why are you so passionate about that? And how have your previous experience shaped your commitment to improving culture and reinvesting in the workforce?
Well, I mean, from a passion perspective, it comes back to what I said before about, wanting my kids to be able to, have the opportunity to move back here. Just some quick stats on Northeast Ohio. There are almost 8,000 manufacturing facilities in Northeast Ohio. So basically the top northeast corner of the state. They account for 30% of the employment and 50% of the economic output of this region. So they are critical to the economic vitality here in the region. 94% of them have 100 or fewer employees, right? So they, one way to look at it is they're too big to fail and they're too small to serve, right? So that comes back to that market failure of how do we help those folks. I should have thought to bring with me one of my favorite books is a book around the space that's called The Technology Fallacy, and how people are really the key to digital transformation. So I'm a big believer that, manufacturers, solution providers, they're all problem solvers, like at our nature, right? Like, we want to engage and we want to solve problems. And if I go back throughout the course of my career, I started on the software side of things, working in the automotive tier 1 space. So build to order, just in time. And it was all receiving an order from the car manufacturer, and we were servicing one of the tier 1 suppliers. But everything that we did in that plant was applicable, even if it was to another organization, whether it was within the 4 walls of a business, just taking an order from, the scheduling system, or if it was part of this extended, supply chain. So I've always been driven by the fact that the technologies can scale, right? The solutions, the principles, all those things apply no matter, what size the organization is. And so it's really been, for me, trying to figure out, how do we make that happen? How do we help that happen for these 7,700 manufacturers in Northeast Ohio that are going to, help keep this region strong, and you take those numbers and you apply them, multiply them out across the nation, right? And you're talking hundreds of thousands of small companies that need access to things that could absolutely help them move forward.
Yeah, definitely. Well, to the first part of your answer there, I will confirm, as a recruiter for engineers, I've never met an engineer, which, is a big part of our industry at all levels, that did not get into engineering to not solve a problem.
Okay.
if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I've watched, so being on the software side, and then, I ran global product marketing for a division of General Electric for a handful of years. And we lived with the reality that there were all sorts of point solutions that were created. Why? To solve a problem, right? And the folks in the plant would solve that problem with whatever tool sets that they had available, and they'd solve this problem with whatever tool set they had available to them, and on and on and on. And then you have this patchwork, and then here come the technologists going, hey, guess what? You guys have this horrible infrastructure, right? You've done such a bad job of managing your infrastructure. It's like, that's ridiculous. You haven't given us the tool set we need to solve problems in a way that's scalable and doesn't lock us in, right? And so it all comes back to your point that they have a problem. I need it solved today. I need it solved this hour. I need it solved this week. And they're going to solve those problems. And the technologies absolutely should be in a position of serving them so that they can do that, safely, securely, and, not be stuck trying to live up to some corporate standard that rarely exists. So.
I feel you there. I do want to bring up a question from Chris S. that he has. To what extent do you think SME manufacturers have this fear of the solution providers because over the last 30 plus years, they have gutted or eliminated their own in-house tool room or systems integration capabilities? And to what extent do you think this in-house capability has to be rebuilt? It's actually a really good question.
It's a very good question, Chris. I think that's part of it. I don't think it's all of it. I think there are a lot of companies that didn't have, this centralized function to gut. But I do know, going back to my time at MESA, I was working with one of the largest food companies on the planet, and they talked about the fact very openly that they had, to Chris's point, basically gotten rid of all of their problem solving capabilities. Like they had leaned out their engineering departments to the point where they really were stuck when it came to solving problems. And so it is absolutely a big issue. And, we go through these cycles of outsourcing and insourcing and all that other kind of stuff. And I think it has absolutely had a very big impact as you run more lean with smaller organizations. And the speed of business hasn't slowed down at all. The speed of technology is going bananas, right, with how fast it moves. And so how do you make decisions in those environments? The traditional way is you put somebody on point, right? And you say, all right, well, Ann, you go solve this problem. And I do a bunch of training on Industry 4.0 and such. And I had a person come up to me after a class I taught earlier in the year. And he said, my big takeaway from this class is that this journey requires my HR group, it requires my senior leadership, it requires my maintenance team, it requires my quality team, right? And their answer to Industry 4.0 was to put it on my shoulders. And he said, I'm walking back and I'm telling them this has to stop. Like, I can't be the one point to figure this out. It has to be a much bigger engagement with the organization. And so we actually got them plugged in with a local integrator and with the National Institute on Smart Manufacturing, CESMII, and they are working with them right now to elevate that understanding in the organization and figure out a plan of how they move forward. So that's a great question, Chris.
Absolutely. You see that with apprenticeships too. And that's something that we bring up a lot on LinkedIn, a lot in the manufacturing community. When we talk about, we remember this time at one point where we had these apprenticeship programs and, being able to train your workforce in-house and really grow your own workforce. And then it seems like at some point that stopped. And now we're kind of in a position, when it comes to the skills gap, where we're looking down a very long road of over 2 million jobs,
right,
that are going to go unfilled by 2030. Do you think that the concept of lean, do you think that some of those same applications have kind of had an effect on the workforce and talent pipeline as well, or what are your thoughts? This is an ad hoc question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, but I think as far as companies leaning out their staffs, then yeah, I think that's been problematic. I think the principles of lean manufacturing themselves and the, operational excellence, things like that, those are principles that undergird anything we're doing from a technology perspective. And I think it's been really hard for people. There's over the past decade and more directly over the past half decade, we've really seen the focus come from the top down, come from the government, come from business, of saying we have to help the small companies, we have to help, the regions, and they're pouring money into it, and they're pouring money into a system that is structured the way it's structured. So it flows to academia, it flows to nonprofits, it flows to apprenticeship programs and stuff, and there isn't, I think, a real thorough definition and understanding of how all the parts work together. And so I think we have some outdated mechanisms, and we have interest, which is great. We have money, which is great. We have passionate people, which is great. But I do think we need to do a better job of even defining, what it is that we're shooting at. You have apprenticeship programs, or you have workforce programs, and you put a broad label of advanced manufacturing or smart manufacturing or something like that. And it's really hard to be crisp and really define, the roles, the workers, how do we serve them? I tend to look at things through the systems side of things, like the data and the information flowing, and how are you going to lean out your processes and drive profitability and things like that, which is a completely different discussion than if, you're trying to get somebody to work with machinery that now is, computer driven and has a whole lot more technology tied to it. So I think it's really good to see people are engaged and working on it, but I think that the old system, the traditional standard approaches, need a good bit of change to keep up with the pace of how quickly things are evolving out in the real world.
Yeah, well, thank you for your feedback on that. I know that wasn't planned or anything, but I can see that alignment there as well, kind of what I do, and I know what you do and everything. But I do want to give you some time to talk a little bit more about your new venture, Bennett AI. Can you tell us a little bit more about the platform and what you're hoping to achieve with Bennett?
Well, yeah, thank you for that. It's really exactly what we've been talking about. So one of the things I've been truly blessed with throughout my career, you mentioned it before, whether I tried it or not, I ended up really networking well throughout industry. So working at MESA, so I was a volunteer there when I worked in industry, and then I eventually got hired and spent a decade as the president of the association. And so I just met so many great people, so much expertise. And I always said to everybody, we'd have a board meeting, and after the board meeting, there'd be 30 or 40 people in there from manufacturers and systems integrators and tech vendors, and nobody was selling anything. And the interactions, I used to say, if we could just capture and bottle this and make this available to the masses, there's so much experience here. There's so much, wealth of knowledge. And actually, while I was there, I set out and said, we have to find a way to be more social. We have to find a way to be more open. We have to engage more people. We have to share knowledge. We have to problem solve together. And they said, that's great. We can figure it out. So if you can figure it out, go ahead. And that actually led to me starting with a couple of founding partners, Bennett, with the idea that there'll be really an industrial services marketplace where you can find talent and you can engage in knowledge sharing, problem solving, all those things that we've been talking about. Because we can go out and facilitate that. Like you and I today, we could go out and we could have our own delivery service to help as many manufacturers as we could. But we'd get through a dozen or a couple dozen. And that, like I said, I got 7,700 here, all within driving distance within an hour and a half. And we're not going to get there without some tech platform underneath us. And that's really what Bennett was started for and what we're working toward.
That's amazing. Yeah, it just becomes just a virtual, replication, a digital twin. Should we use that word?
No.
A digital twin of those conversations in those organizations. So it's accessible at any time. You don't have to kind of commit to like a once a month meeting or anything. You can just, it's an open forum. We'll call it that.
Well, and when you think about how, like, I know so many people that are retired now that have a wealth of knowledge, and they don't want to hang a shingle and start a business and go out and sell their services and go through the process of becoming an approved vendor and all. Like, they just want to give, right? And there's really no place for them to give, and there's no place for me as somebody who's seeking that knowledge to come and get it. It doesn't happen on LinkedIn, right? It doesn't happen on Facebook. So, there's a wealth of knowledge. We're sitting here worried about the gray tsunami and the great retirement and the tribal knowledge loss and stuff. And yet we have all of these people with all of this expertise that is completely accessible if we can build a channel between the two. And that's really what we're working on.
That's amazing. Yes. That's something we talk about all the time. The great tsunami, the tribal knowledge. So that's awesome. That's just a really cool project. And I cannot wait to see how it grows over the next couple of years as well.
You'll be a part of it. So
yes. Count me in. I opt in for that.
Excellent.
Sign me up. Yes. Anything I can do to help. I've got time for one more question here today, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I end every episode of Workforce 4.0 kind of referring back to the title of the show. And I named this episode Digital Transformation Goes Beyond the IOT, which, we know is the Internet of Things.
Yep.
Where do you think that we could offer the most room for improvement when it comes to connecting humans, just like we are connecting devices through the IIoT, which is the Industrial Internet of Things? And what technologies are you most excited about that you see employers using to assist with these capabilities and give people more meaningful work?
I'm going to go a little off script. Like I think the easiest answer is, there's, solutions for downtime tracking or, visibility or connected worker platforms and stuff like that. I think if I had the opportunity to get in front of a bunch of manufacturers, and I would go more on the social route, right? Like what we're doing right here. I love to see Discord channels that are popping up with thousands of people on that are sharing knowledge together, right? The Industry 4.0 Club on Clubhouse, what we're doing here on LinkedIn. And so I really think that we are connecting people socially this way. And that holds a lot of power. And I would really, if I had the opportunity to speak to a bunch of manufacturers, I'd encourage them to get more involved and get out there more with these kind of technologies. Because when you make those kind of connections, you can find people that have the tech solutions that will help solve a downtime problem or quality problem or robotic welding or, whatever your issues are. So I would probably say that I would encourage people, and I'm excited to see, what sort of the social, the collaboration types of tools can do for manufacturers, for our whole ecosystem.
Absolutely. And, we're a very good example with the Industry 4.0 Club because, I didn't physically walk, but I just kind of roamed into this room talking about manufacturing on Clubhouse. And I'm interested in manufacturing, obviously, with what I do and everything. But was I the expert on the digital twins? Am I the expert on cybersecurity? Am I the expert on, industrial integration and all of that stuff? No, I'm not the expert. So, you don't have to be the expert in anything outside of just who you are and what you bring to the table. And then, when there's an opportunity for you to share what you know. And then, at the same time, you still get to learn from other experts in that industry about what they do. And I know that Yen has taught me a lot. Martin has taught me a lot.
Sure.
Ira, you. So it's just been a really great experience with that intellectual exchange.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's more and more accessible. I think the pandemic has gotten people to a point where they're more, at least from a manufacturing industry perspective, more open to using these types of collaboration tools, more open to accepting help remotely. And I also think, the younger generation is more digitally savvy, right? They're digital natives and they're used to sharing their whole lives online. And so I think there's a lot of that, concern about intellectual property or our secret sauce and things like that certainly have to be respected. But I think that a lot of that holding us back is probably more because of a mindset of people my age, as opposed to the younger generation coming in and saying, I got a problem, I need help, I'll throw it out there and we'll find help, just the way that you are articulating.
Yeah, like crowdsourcing, right?
Yeah,
you have a question, Reddit, there's probably a subreddit for that.
Right.
You want to learn how to do something, YouTube, there's probably a tutorial for that. So we're very used to just looking it up and going and finding it. So
yeah. The other thing that I find real quickly, I'm sorry, the other thing I find is that when I was at MESA, that the message was typically very horizontal, talking broadly about manufacturing operations management or manufacturing execution, and companies used to come and say, well, we really want to drill down deep. We want to get into specialty chemicals, or we want to get into oil and gas or whatever. And once they would start doing that, they would find that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's really not proprietary, that horizontal, like we could share a whole lot more than people initially think we can before we get to the point of differentiation or, intellectual property and things like that. So I think the same, we'll find out over time that we're probably hiding from things that we don't really need to hide from, and be more open the way that you were just articulating.
I would, again, I'm coming from just like the human resources aspect of it. I would agree.
Yeah.
I've had similar experiences. So yeah, I think, we could share more than what we feel or believe we can. Well, Mike, I really enjoyed having you on today. I think the world of you. I really do. I appreciate your time and your energy and just your positivity. You're such an inspiration, influence, and just uplifting. So I appreciate having you on today. For anybody that is joining the conversation or maybe watching the live today, what's the best way they can reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you could email me. My email is mike@bennett.ai. Bennett is spelled with an IT in the name, so it's BENNIT.ai. So email me or hit me up on LinkedIn. Absolutely. This is what I like doing the most is sharing like this. So absolutely happy to do it.